So I want to make sure we're briefing this out, because I'm telling you that we're getting 75% within the first 30 minutes. That's why I'm reading off of Alpha 1. Alpha 1 is the snippet on the POS of just Alpha 1. Alpha 1 is taking place first. 30 minutes of time. I know that because when I created Alpha 1, it's only 30 minutes long. If I don't know that, I can go over here and look. If you highlight this, it'll tell you how long it is. This will say it's 30 minutes long, so now I know what this number is. Why this is important is because as I go down to the bottom number is in totality, Alpha 1 and 2 combined. So I'm briefing out this on why I'm changing objects. So Alpha 2, I could say, hey, I want to take Alpha 2, and maybe I want to go ahead and look for a swamp capsized boat or PIW or whatever. The other thing I'm doing though is I'm searching at 500 feet. Get rid of 1,000 feet. I don't know if it was ever in your standard ops, but it shouldn't even be considered. Because it's only good for larger objects, it's not good for the people. So we're getting rid of that entirely. There's a whole table in the addendum that's just getting struck. Table HA.
Problem is when you get to this point, you say, I don't want to search for the cutting cabin, I want to search for the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that earlier on, and you can't go back. And if you do that, it's now split the particles in half by taking 50% is going to be cutting cabin, 50% is going to be that swamp capsize. But if you were for sure that it's going to be that cutting cabin, you've now kind of almost like cut yourself at the knees a little bit.
Don't worry about that cutting particles thing. Drop that from your mind, because that doesn't matter.
Okay.
Particle count doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
Searching out of 1,250 particles versus 5,000 particles won't make a difference.
Okay.
If you want, because I get this a lot. If you want to see it, I'll show you, because I've got slides. I just didn't want to put it in here because we didn't have a whole lot of time.
I'll press the I believe button.
Okay, perfect. If not, I'll prove it. I'll make a point.
I'll press it.
But yes, so you're finding 75% of everything of the P field for the cutting cabin, and then we're going to look for everything else beyond that. So then you could say, what if I spend the remaining 2.5 hours on the PIW? Now, would this be effort allocation back to blowing out a resource or whatever it is? You could argue that. I think there's plenty of options for you to turn around and say, well, I don't think this is the most effective use. That's a whole side conversation. But is this a better way of utilizing the 3 hours than the original? And that's the point. And so you should be looking at this and saying, maybe I don't need 2.5 hours to still look at the PIW. So there are two prevailing theories here. And I'm going to write them down so everybody can kind of make sure that they're clear. Because everybody, I always end up with this question of, what should I be looking for? And I always write these two down. Here's your two theories. Okay? You have progression theory, which is what I used to teach. The idea of starting with the cutty cabin and moving on to the swamp capsize, moving down to the PIW. Okay? And then you have just PIW theory. And you just go straight for PIW. Because you'll find the other stuff. Right? This is what you should default to. This is whenever you have small drift areas and you have large SRU effort, also called the CE. Okay, see, right? Progression, though, would be for large search areas and minimal SRUs. So like early on, I got a great big overdue and I can't adequately cover a PIW search. I should be looking for the cutty cabin, but once I remove that possibility, I need to switch it into smaller swamp capsize boats and continue on. But it's the idea of get off the big upright vessel as soon as possible. I don't want to say which districts, it wasn't you, but there was a district who was working in overdue in which their entire first 8 hours was spent on the upright vessel. And they only drifted the upright vessel. They actually removed the possibility of that upright boat in 2 hours. So the other 6 hours was pretty much for naught. Because the cutty cabin won't always be in the same position as the small capsize boats.
So with the progression, the large area, minimal SRU, now this comes down to the operator. But if you're looking for a cutting cabin, you're saying you want to go through your progression, but it's a large area. In essence, you're going to be using the majority of that time searching for that cutting cabin, leaving not a whole lot of time left to go down to a swamp capsize, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
I get the progression thing, but if
Well,
you're
you
giving
start
a
wherever
kilo
you're
4
comfortable.
hours, it's sometimes you're not even getting containment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're going to start wherever you're comfortable. If you want to start with the cutty cabin, then as soon as you're done looking for the cutty cabin, which could be whatever POS you're wanting, you switch. But if you're comfortable that you think you should be going straight out for the swamp, then start there.
And that's what you're saying, you're split. And if you know that
Yes.
your SRU's gonna make that time, then you're
Yes.
gonna go ahead and split. But if you don't, you're in essence going onto a Bravo pattern.
The way you're gonna know this is because if I get a coverage factor of 4 for a cutting cabin, that means I have 4 times the amount of time it needs to actually search for it. So I would cut up my cutting cabin by a quarter of the time and then spend the remainder of time looking for the small capsize boat.
Have they made a fix, excuse me my ignorance here, but when you get to this point, you're like, crap, I have a coverage factor of 4. When you try to go back, you can't go back to say, all right, I want to reduce the time and graze it out to the point where you can't say, I want to cut their time, and then.
You have to split it. Yep. And I'm gonna show you what you're gonna kind of do for that. Okay? What you're doing though, what we're all starting to realize is exactly one of the things that's missing in the ACTSUS. Whenever all of you see this ACTSUS, you're gonna see this term called myopic optimization. You're all gonna go, what's that? And myopic optimization, myopic just means short-sighted. So what we're doing is we're causing SAROPs to be short-sighted. Don't think that you have 6 hours of effort, think you only have 30 minutes. What would you do in 30 minutes? When you treat SAROPs into this idea of cutting it down to something that's much smaller and more manageable and making it put the smallest amount of probability over the highest concentration of the particles, it does a lot better. Your POS goes up way faster. So you're gonna see this, and I have a whole video that I created on myopic optimization. And once they finally greenlight the ACTSUS, I'll greenlight the video and upload it. I brought it if you really wanna see it, but it's like 30 minutes and we're not gonna have enough time for all that. But it's basically going over all this, same idea. So when we have the ability to, we should be going straight into, but what if it's an LKP and I got a 60? Well then you should be going straight into PIW because you're gonna find the other stuff. But then you're gonna say, well, am I in a confirmed PIW search? No. But you're doing a search that's conducive for a PIW, not the same thing. Just because you target PIW in SAROPs does not mean you have a confirmed PIW. It just means you're doing a search that's conducive for PIW. That has to be the way it's briefed. Because you can't say I'm doing a PIW search.
But still, Chief, it's going to reduce your track spacing, and it's going to take more time.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. But I'll get into that. But the idea still is that I'd rather be surprised, delightfully surprised, to find the boat instead.
Yeah. So what we teach is based on the information you have at hand. You know, unless you have an unconfirmed PIW. We deal with some pretty vast areas. You know, Lake Superior takes a good 2.5, 3 hours for the helicopter to get to some farthest reaches.
Right.
So they're working on fuel. So it's hard, hit it hard, hit it fast. You know, be most effective as quickly as possible. Like
That's the top one.
Right. Exactly. That's typically our rule of thumb.
Right. But what if you had a cell phone forensics?
Yeah, much different.
Bottom. Doesn't have to be any harder than that. If it's a big enough area, you go, I don't know what to do with this thing. You need to go with whatever the smallest target you're comfortable. The small capsize boat or the big boat, depending on what you got. If I get a fixed wing out of Canada and they can go through the area really quickly and tell me there's no upright boat there, then I move on to the swamp pretty quick. That's the idea.
So what you're saying is one's not necessarily better than the other. You just have to recognize maybe your biases a little bit towards one or the other and consider the other option.
Exactly. I want you to realize big areas with minimal amounts of effort, you should be looking at the progression idea. If you have small drifts and you have plenty of effort, then you should be going straight into the PIW searches. Because both of these have trade-offs. Just like you said, if I do this wrong, I'm spending way too much time on the PIW and it's a big area. It won't work. But the other way of going progression on a PIW doesn't make sense either, because why would I blow through the area looking for a cutting cabin when they only have hours to live? It's a small search area, let's go straight for the worst case scenario, let's just go down.
Chief, are you optimizing on both of them? Are you only optimizing on the PIW when you're doing it that way? So you're not even optimizing at all on the cutting cabin?
No, because I wanted to see it. If I optimize on the PIW like we did here,
Right.
look how effective it is for the cutting cabin.
Right.
88%.
What would happen if you optimized for both of them?
It's going to open up that track spacing, which makes it less effective for the PIW.
I thought it
Wouldn't it
automatically.
find a happy medium though that would give us good coverage in a short amount of time?
It could find a happy medium, but the happy medium is going to be for both scenarios. And if you're actually in the water, I'm not in a happy medium if I'm either in the boat or in the water.
We talked about weighting earlier.
Mhm.
If you weight your search objects and optimize for all 4, does that do similar things than what we're talking about?
Kind of, but you removed all the decision process out of you and into SARLs based on probabilities that you just picked out of a hat.
Okay.
So I'm not a fan, that's why.
Yeah,
Because
I'm just
if
trying
you-
to think through and looking at things, because those are going to be some of the questions I'll get. You know,
Yeah.
why can't we just weight the objects?
So the reason why you don't want to just weight the objects is because you're just going to, how are we going to create a standard for that? Because your POS will be completely different between watch standards if they weight things differently. The conditionals will be identical, but the joints will be completely different. Because weighing them there changes object probability down here. And so your joint numbers in it could be completely skewed based off of what they did. And if you're going to take it out of their hands and tell them, well, just go with whatever SAROPS gives you, I think we're doing a disservice by just saying just go with whatever SAROPS gives you. Weigh them according to whatever everybody else agrees, optimize on all, call it a day. I don't think that's the way we want to use it. And hopefully they'll want to use the program that way. We're trying to use the program in a way that makes more sense to the user, because all of us were doing this. If I gave you all an LOB, I don't think any of you would just say, well, we're not going to search the LOB for the first hour, right? I think everybody in here would say, I'd go down, do it down and back on the LOB. But you couldn't get SAROPS to do it before. And then you'd sit there fighting with the computer going, well, I want to do this, stupid computer. It's because you're creating one parallel for 3 hours and it didn't want to do it that way.
But I think you can probably search the LOB in about an hour with a helo.
You could. In this instance, you can do it in 30 minutes.
But optimizing, optimize for the boat, not PIW.
And that's what we did. First 30 minutes, I looked for the PI, looked for the boat. But I was spending the remaining 2.5 hours looking for the PIW. I'm going to show you when I put all these plans next to each other. So I'm going to spend the remaining 2.5 hours looking at PIW.
And I think my SMCs would probably say 1 hour to search the LOB, cuddy cabin coverage factor greater than 1, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're not going into a PIW search.
No, and I don't want you to say that we're going to do that every time either. So you have to understand that
We use the term apprehension a lot. What's the level of apprehension? How did the call sound? That's where we get into that.
right. But what if I end up in the same idea of, does the watch standard know how to do that whenever it's Mayday, Mayday, we're going in the water? And they get that. And now you think there's legitimately distress. Do you still attack it with looking for only the cuddy cabin? So this is why I'm saying that we have to be clear on how we're training these, because as we train default responses, they're not going to hit it the same way. They're going to immediately defer back to, well, I don't have that much apprehension. When you didn't lose anything, all I'm doing is putting the SRU in a more conducive pattern. But I'll get into that too, because I think that there's a valid point there to say, well, what if I don't give them all that time?
Right.
And I want to just see how effective it is. And that goes back into the effort allocation. Okay, so search for PIW at this point. I want you to think of that. Because I get this all the time. Like, why am I doing a PIW search in alpha? And I go, well, what if you're wrong? I mean, well, yeah, but majority of the time, the majority of the time they're going to be in a boat. Yeah, majority of the time they'll be in a boat. Majority of the time the boat can be there, majority of the time it can be a small capsized boat. But what happens when you're wrong? So this specific language is even in the all coast. Minimize maximum regret. Your maximum regret is that you were wrong. There are people in the water. Oops. So we need to account for that possibility. So if I spend the other 2.5 hours, this is kind of what you're talking about too, but we can split something else and say the remaining time, what if I don't want to look for the PIW, I want to look for the small capsize boat? Because that's the idea of the progression theory. Maybe I just look for the small capsize boat for 2.5 hours. And now you'll realize that that's way too much time because I have a coverage factor of 3 doing that. So now this is too much time for that. So you can tell them, well, you don't need that much time to do that. You can do that in a third of the time. So maybe we go back and tell them, okay, how quickly can you get off the small capsize boat? Well, a third of the time, 2.5 hours, call it an hour. So guess what? You tell SAROPS, hey, change alpha 2 from that to 2 hours, or to 1 hour, and it'll create something much better. I show you that because you shouldn't exceed coverage factors of 2 if you think that that's what you're looking for. It just becomes a waste at that point. You can see how it starts to flatline. I would rather go over the area multiple times than to just keep increasing the coverage factor at that point. So if I spend so alpha 1, we did 30 minutes down the track line looking for the cuddy cabin. 75% POS in the cuddy cabin. Alpha 2, I told it look for the swamp capsize boat. It's telling me I have a 65% still at looking at the swamp capsize boat. Coverage factor hitting right around 2, I'm okay with that. The remainder of time now is PIW. That's the progression theory. Going for the biggest, going all the way down, and just saying, hey, if I have to use you for 3 hours, I'd rather use you intelligently. If I were to put these plans next to each other on a graph like this to show you, this is what I wanted you to realize. The very first plan was the one that SAROPS did. It wanted the highest POS. It got it at the end. But if you were in the water, you'd want that. The highest POS in the shortest amount of time, and it starts to flatline towards the end.
That's total joint.
We looked at his total joint. So that's what the myopic optimization means. We put all these four together, just so you can see them all. This was what Sarov's created. This would be if you did the half hour down and back and then spent the remainder of time on the PIW. This is if you spend the remainder of time on a small capsized boat, and this is if you go through progression. So this is what I'm saying. When PIW search is not viable, progression should be the plan. But when the PIW is high enough, then you should just use this. Because the highest probabilities for the PIWs are those. Same effort, they're all getting used for 3 hours. Nothing's changed there. But these are all more effective for the PIW and just as effective for the cutting cabins. This is why I mean you're not spending enough time playing in the planner. Because you need to know how to do all these things to start making sense of what is your POS reports telling you, what are the plan telling you. Start looking at it in not just a number, but a number in relation to time and a number in relation to effort. And we have to push this, and we have to push the training all the way up the chain, all the way through the SMCs, and it has to come all the way to you guys at the district level. Because at the district level, you need to be able to talk about all of this. Do I think all that's going to happen overnight? No. I've been pushing this boulder uphill for years. Go ahead.
It's kind of my question. How do you take this back and train down rather than having it come from SAR school? That's the quandary that I
And now
am
you
facing.
realize why I shook CG SAR and said I need a freaking all coaster. When Stan pushed 2 years ago, they said we want to test POS. I said good luck. Because what I was finding after teaching it for years is that there was a fundamental misunderstanding of what that number even meant and how to read that report. But Stan said we've got to do something with it because this is the one number that everyone's using and not everyone understands it.
And one of the things with POS is like the vast majority of times I've even had any conversation about POS, they said and I'm guilty of this too. We say POS without ever specifying is it conditional, is it total joint.
Yes.
We're briefing for suspension on a total joint when
Yes.
we not even necessarily considering some of the objects. And I think removing that from our vocabulary is a big step forward, and always
Yes.
being specific about which POS we're referring to.
Yes. So Lieutenant Nachi forwarded me an email that was from Commander Mitchell down in D9, down in D8. So down at D8, he was an MSP2 graduate. He and I had a lot of the same lunch conversation you and I had. He was talking about POS and time and evaluating conditionals and looking at everything in totality. He works that major case in which a special forces operator falls out of the back in C-130, and he starts, his watch was telling him his POS was like 60 something, and then next day it was like 50 something. He's like, why'd it go down? And his watch told him that because the drift is getting larger, the POS is gonna start to tank because containment's getting lost. And he said, that's not the way I understood it, so I wanted to ask you if that's true. And I said, that's not true. And I said, because it's not done on that anymore. It's all on PFAIL. Had a particle been seen in alpha, it was still seen in alpha. It doesn't change just because it's delta. It was seen, it was seen. So the POS should not go down. And he goes, then why did it go down? I said, let me see the drift. So I opened it up, and what it was is that as they were reviewing their patterns, they were pushing sorties so far out that as they were reviewing them, they couldn't review them because they weren't done yet. And so they were having to mark them as tentative. When they mark it as tentative, SAROP says that hasn't taken place yet, so it doesn't count it as a POS for now, but it counts it as a POS for the plan. So what they weren't realizing is they were briefing at different time periods. POS is not just a number, it's a number in relation to time. And so they're saying, hey, without the Charlie 2 or without the C-130's information, this would be our POS now. Oh, okay, then that would make sense. But that's why it became a major tripping point for him, was that these were senior people. His GS-12 and his senior chief, and I knew both of them, were briefing incorrectly. And it wasn't for any fault other than the fact that just the POS itself is complicated. It is hard. So I didn't want to do you all the disservice of walking you through my video again and just doing those. So I brought more complicated concepts to show you what the all coast is going to be and to start leading off those conversations. How do we get there? How do we read that? Because if you're wanting to know just how to read a POS report, then please just watch the video. You're gonna eat up at least a good half hour, an hour of your time. But these, as you start to break down plans, can start to be much more effective ways of mental engagement into, am I doing what makes sense for the worst case scenario? Am I doing what makes sense in accordance with policy? All of that. This is the last one I thought you guys would ask me. The other thing is I could show you how this, I can give you at least the first 30 minutes before the SRU ever got off the deck. And you go, well, that isn't, why? And I go, did I need to know how much time that the SRU could give me at the very beginning of this? Did any of that matter?
No.
So if I created this gigantic amount of time and I split off the first 30 minutes, I turn the rest of it off, and I say, optimize this 30 minutes, tell me what you get. And it does that perfect down the back LOB. I can now go do that, and now I can have a conversation about what to do next. Because I just kicked the can 30 minutes. And I've got this whole big snippet of time that all I have to do is just rip that off and create another pattern based on the conversation me, CDO, SMC all have. But if you can't read any of this stuff, then it's all arbitrary. But that's what I mean by it can go much faster. You don't need to plan all of alpha from the initial notification. You just have to plan far enough out that you can make some general assumptions at that point.
Is MSP1 gonna be covering any of this?
Myopic optimization will have to get taught in MSP. Because they need you to learn how to split, deactivate, and optimize,
Yes.
all of that.
Yes.
So again, hopefully my video will help that, at least to get the process started. But this is what I mean by the training programs have to increase. You have to not just do scenarios, the scenarios as long also with planning. In which you turn around and say, hey, I'm gonna give you this entire amount, give me, utilizing what we talked about, progression theory, and your initial effort of only 30 minutes, tell me what you would come up with and why. Whatever. I want you all to take time to look at the videos, but I didn't want to rehash the videos because I thought that would be a disservice to you all to go, he just taught exactly the same video that I just had and that I just spent some time on. So if you haven't seen the video, I can send it to you. It's also available on our website. It's available through me directly, $10. I wish I could monetize
Do you have a
this stuff.
YouTube channel?
Yeah, I know, right? That'd be great. But the video does a good job of saying, okay, here's an alpha report, one object, one SRU. Here's a Bravo report. Here's what the Bravo report means. Here's why that's important. Here's the simulator POS report. Here's the planner report. Here's the external report. There's 3 different reports. Here's what they mean. Here's why they mean that. But it will take some time. Like I said, 3 to 5 times is pretty much the standard from what I've seen from people. You're gonna have to see it a number of times before you, okay, I get it. Yes, and so again, your alpha could be as long or as short as you need to also. Your alpha could only be 5 hours from now, 6 hours from now. It doesn't have to be the full epic like it used to be. You could have an alpha that's gonna end 4 hours from now just because you wanna reevaluate where you're at that point. You can do a number of different things from that to figure out where you wanna be within that. But then understand that if you do that and you go into Bravo, the other thing I push for in MSP2 is like, what happens when your scenario changes? Should you go back and re-rack alpha? The answer is no. You should leave alpha alone, change it for Bravo. So like for instance, you find out that they departed on, they told you according to that they left out on Saturday, you're doing a drift, and then you get into it and you find out they didn't leave on Saturday, they left on Sunday. Oh crap, so do I go back into alpha and change the scenario? No, you go into Bravo and write the new scenario in Bravo and then just weigh the other one at 0 or remove it entirely. But now the simulator would be against the new scenario and you could go forward, but now it's gonna be based off what wasn't located after alpha. And that's where people are getting twisted, is that they think that this new number, this Bravo number, is the total number. It's not. It's on what's left, what you haven't looked for, what you haven't located yet. But the simulator told you what you should have seen by now. So I wanted to get into that. I will teach more of that this afternoon if anybody's sticking around for that part, because I wanted to teach specifically into the POS reports so people understand why. But I wanted to front load a lot of the OUs and why this stuff is important and where to start. And yeah, I think that's it. We can get into more stuff. I've got more stuff, but we're already starting to push up against one. The how long it'll take, again, if you do this right, you can do it before the SRU ever gets airborne. I used to do it all the time because you could push through the scenario pretty quickly. And then you know that if you max out the SRU and then you just split it, just assign that initial pattern however you want it to, you can give it to them immediately and start evaluating it. You just kick the can however far, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is. And then you evaluate it, have a conversation with it, and then once they get up, they can tell you the total endurance, then you would just change that block on the Bravo, on the second one, and then optimize it. I show you how to do all that. the key idea is evaluate PIW every time. If this is the question, then that's a training issue. You're saying the reason why I can't put PIW in is because it lowers my POS, because SMC start having questions, because district pushes back, whatever it is. If it's because of briefing, if it's because of suspension, if that's the reason you're not putting PIW in, then you have a training issue. Because you did not necessarily say you had a PIW. You were doing a search that was conducive for the PIW. That didn't necessarily mean you had one. So that's up to you guys and how you figure that out, because that's why we need to do that.
Yeah, the-
Options. I showed this to some pilots because I was trying to make it known to them. If I do, this is more of a drifted in LKP, so I have a hotspot. You all would go back and say, I'd probably Victor Sierra that hotspot, right? Before we move on, and I would do that a couple times. I agree, we're gonna do that, and it's gonna evaluate all of that to tell us what to do there. So we're gonna do a couple Victor Sierras, and then now we're gonna have to go back and parallel the whole thing, because now that we've removed the hotspot, by removing with a couple Victor Sierras, I've kind of cut out the high probability, and now I've got kind of equal probability. So now I'm gonna go back and do a parallel, but if I'm doing a PIW focused search, it could be looking like this. And your SRUs hate you the whole time. But could you do the same thing? All my Victor Sierras, I'm just jumbling it all up. But when I'm getting ready to do this, I open up their track space and just say like a 0.3. And I got time left over now. Oh, still got time left over. Do it 3 times, because at 0.1 track spacing, I can do the same thing at 0.3 3 times. And now if I open it up to 0.3, I can evaluate how effective it is at 0.3, and maybe I just want to keep doing that. Again, SARPs can help you talk about those differences. Whenever I break this down and show a pilot, I go, would you rather me give you 1 3-hour pattern that is at a 0.1 or 3 1-hour patterns? They go, give me that one. Perfect. Because for me, I think that I like that better because I'm moving through the area in 1 hour and I'm getting a decent return on that. So you have to use this system to help evaluate and help quantify why you want to make the changes you do. If you just turn around and push back and say, well, we can't do it that way because of this, we're not doing it right. We can use this system to help us quantify it in a way that proves it's actually better.
So what SAR school teaches is 0.1 for PIW, right? So
No, I got rid of that. Initial actions say 0.1 for PIW. It's only for initial actions. Beyond that,
I think it gets translated in the field, so you don't think of the 0.3
I
as
know.
you're searching. It's like the next step.
Yes.
And I almost like just doing the 0.3, but splitting, instead of doing a 0.1 offset, do a 0.15 and just split that, so you're only doing 2.
2, yeah.
but here's the other part of that. So if you split them all up into that and you tell SAROPS don't create anything lower than 0.3, you can do that by telling them that the minimum track spacing is 0.3. But when you do that, you might find out based on the current that it doesn't want an offset because the current's pushing fast enough to move different water over the exact same positions. So there's gonna be times when the system's gonna help you go, I don't want to do an offset, I just want to put it right back over it. You go, perfect. Same thing with 2 Victor Sierras. It might put 2 Victor Sierras, it might not offset to the exact way you want to, but by optimizing the 2 Victor Sierras, it goes, well, I want to do here, and then I want to move it up current a little bit and do another one. And you go, okay, I'm okay with that. That's what I mean. You can use this thing to really help you, and you might be, if you're really spending a lot of time to do things like that, realize there's probably an easier way to do it.
So it's doing what the boat's doing. They're dropping a marker. They're doing their Victor Sierra. Now they're relocating the marker. They're doing the Victor Sierra offset from there.
Yeah,
SAROPS is just telling you how to do that.
correct. And it can do it a little bit quicker for you because you can plan that before they ever got out there. You say, here's your first Victor Sierra, here's your second Victor Sierra, and then after that I got you doing a parallel. I can do all of that before they get off the deck. And I know how long those take, and I go, how much time are you gonna have left? And they go, I don't know. That's what I mean. I can have a conversation, but I can assign all that because every 60 in the world can give me at least that. 1 hour sorting 2 Victor Sierras. That's not even an hour and a half.
It's usually about 10 minutes after we call the air station for the pilot to call and say, all right, what do we got? What do you want for us to do? And we can give them, hey, here's the last known position. We want you to do a Victor Sierra offset it, do another one, and then we'll have a pattern.
And then if you want, I can put that into SAROPS to show you how effective that was to say, hey, if there's a cuddy cabin, you should have seen it by now. So then you take the remaining time, you have a conversation with SMC, with the CDO, with everybody else, and say, okay, hey, I got an 88% POS on just the 2 Victor Sierras on the cuddy cabin, so I don't think we got a cuddy cabin. We're either in the wrong spot or the sank, or there's no distress. There's all those are possible, right? But now you can quantify that based on apprehension levels, based on what your SRU can do. If it's FAC and it's gorgeous out there and your pilots are willing to do it, why not just go ahead and attack the PIW possibility right now? If it's nasty, you have a higher apprehension, again, you can tackle the PIW possibility. There's a lot of ways to do this, but you have to use the metrics to help you. And I think breaking down those metrics into that in accordance with time will make it much more palatable for an SMC to say, okay, that makes sense.
And Myopic lets you reprioritize the searches, right, when you have them listed.
Yeah, it'd be
You go
based
in-
on the order.
That's right, change the
Chronological
order,
order. Yeah, so
which
go
is
in
huge.
chronological order and you wanna turn them off as you do it, so yeah. I'll have that training should be out shortly, but I have all of that available to you all, so I'll try to create some of this stuff for you. Like I said, I didn't wanna reinvent the wheel and just give you the same POS PowerPoint that you're gonna be able to go get and watch. But please watch those PowerPoints, they're gonna do a good job, but if you can use that and then go into this stuff, you'll get more.